I watched more horror films this year than probably any other year. Super amped for the Nosferatu remake, but until that, I wanted to go through every single horror movie I saw in 2024, in order from worst to best. The Crow remake! Yay! This is one of the worst remakes I think I've ever seen, and I've seen some atrocious ones. It comes across like it was made by AI and some goth kid's dad. This movie's for people who watch Suicide Squad and think that's couples' goals. I forget the name of the actress in this. She is horrible. Wherever this actress came from, put her back. It's like an influencer walked on set, and they're like, well, she's early, and decided to cast her. This just reeks of corporate meandering. It misses everything that was special about the first, and its biggest mistake was existing. This movie is not goth, it's not edgy, it's not cool. The Crow remake is a motivational speaker who comes to a school assembly of teenagers and sits down on the chair backwards. I'm gonna stop talking about this film. This thing sucks. Ugh. Next is The Inheritance. It's kind of haunted house, it's kind of slasher vibe, it's a bunch of people stuck together. It's every cliche of a modern horror film that you can imagine. Like every character trope, every jump scare, violin stings, all of it is in this film. There is literally nothing to say about this film. Other than that, it's bad, it moves fast, yet it's dull, and the moment you finish watching it, you'll move on to something else, and you will forget about it instantaneously. No Voltees. There's nothing particularly interesting about the characters or the plot. However, I do think this is a good film for filmmakers to watch, kind of as a cautionary tale of how sound mixing and sound effects, music cues, can derail your horror pacing. It seems like they're building to something else and they'll just interrupt. It doesn't feel like a natural extension of the horror that's being escalated. I don't know what went wrong in the editing room, but yeah. It's not a good one, and it's so unnecessary. It didn't need to be this way. Next up, Latency. It comes across kind of like a stretched out Black Mirror episode. And you know, that still might have worked. It could have been kind of like a fun 6 out of 10 rental. The script didn't really know, first of all, how to end, and secondly, how to make the characters people that you even root for or are interested in. There's a lot of very weak and cheesy banter. It's not scary in the slightest. Introduces semi-intriguing ideas about tech, and sort of just squanders them. It's not sure where to go with it, and then by the end, it just kind of peters out.
Come on, just enough to draw blood.
No, I'm out.
Jen, please. I need this.
Sorry, Hannah, but this is crazy.
Handling the undead, this fucking thing. This was like running a very short distance, but felt like a marathon because they strapped like a bunch of barbells to your leg. It didn't feel like it was slow for any kind of notable purpose. It's a very nice looking film. There's some pretty framing, but then nothing happened. Like it just kept crawling towards these plot points. This is some of the worst pacing I've seen in a horror film. Aggressively glacial, and I don't see that as profound. I see that as just making this unnecessarily hard for the audience. I love Lake Mungo. I love Lost in Translation. I think there's slow movies that work beautifully. There are long movies that work wonderfully that deserve that runtime. This does not. Under Paris. Oh, Netflix. It's bad. It's not even fun bad. It's not Sharknado. Honestly, I turned against the film pretty early because the main character, who I guess we're supposed to like, but just comes across as reckless and stupid, and it doesn't get much better. I mean, the way characters act in this film is devoid of all logic. There's just so many sequences that you have to suspend so much disbelief. It's schlocky, but without being fun enough to get past that. Trap. Yeah, I'm gonna get some hate for this because I know some people really love this movie. I know some people that are all over M. Night Shyamalan's dick. I mean, that's fine. Maybe it's cozy. So the thing is with Trap is that there's so much wrong with it. He basically made this movie to promote the singing career of a relative. So that's strike one. Strike two is M. Night Shyamalan still has no idea how human beings speak to each other. I don't understand what's going on when he's directing people. And what's so bizarre is it's not like a disconnect between the script and the director because it's the same fucking guy. This wasn't really a problem for him earlier in his career. He's devolved. Here, Here, it's just like simple dialogue between two people, like two strangers, and it's like they're aliens who just assimilated human bodies and are trying to understand how nouns and verbs work. That doesn't help the film either. It doesn't feel like it's on purpose. In Strike 3, while the first third is at least fun because you are genuinely interested in how he's going to get out of this situation, the moment you think about any of the logistics of this situation, the whole plot just falls apart. If he wants us to just laugh at his movies, he needs to be way more fucking clear about it because they're so stupid, a lot of his films, but they don't seem intentionally so.
Just needed some air. There was an accident in the kitchen. I freaked out. A friend got burned.
Stop motion had such a great setup. A live action horror film where stop motion gets out of hand. That's awesome. You can write that script in your sleep. It's there. It's right there, and this film couldn't pull it off. This did not need to be psychological horror, and if it did have to be, it needed to be better at it. It's boring. The character is not interesting. We barely learn anything about her. I hate to break it to all the introverts out there, but being introverted or closed off doesn't, by itself, make you an interesting person. There's nothing to this character at all, and we focus so much on her dumpy apartment, her bland as shit boyfriend, her relationship with her mother, which we couldn't care less about. Is 6 months too early to remake a film? I almost want to give this a lower score because it's so annoying, but I can't deny that the stop motion, the little we see of it, does look good. Apartment 7A. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. I kind of found this movie by accident. It's a prequel, but it's also a remake. And I think that is a colossal mistake. It's following the movie note by note. This is a carbon copy of the story of Rosemary's Baby. And it's so annoying because it doesn't start that way. The character, her main drive, everything about her is completely different to the original. And then after 20 or so minutes, the movie pulls a rug out from under you and goes, nah, psych, you thought you're getting the original movie. We're just gonna copy Rosemary's Baby. And like, that's what it does for the rest of the film. It's just Rosemary's Baby again, but not as good. Julie Garner does a good job. It's well shot, solid production design, but Jesus Christ, that script. The only reason to watch this is if you've seen Rosemary's Baby and you've seen that peak, and maybe you just want something to throw on the TV. If you haven't seen Rosemary's Baby, turn this thing off immediately. You are doing yourself a disservice. Ugh, I'm sweaty. I'm sweaty.
I thought you'd be over the moon.
What? No, I am.
Well, it doesn't sound like it.
I am. I am really. It just, whatever you said to Alan worked like a charm.
Maybe I shouldn't have bothered.
If stop motion was the biggest letdown of the year in the horror department, MaXXXine is a runner-up. It was just a mishmash of ideas. It's a slasher film mixed with a 80s homage, mixed with a commentary on the entertainment industry, mixed with cults. It was very difficult for me to actually care about the story, this kind of mystery element that's involved, because there's just too much shit going on. I don't care about anyone in this movie, including the main character. There's no time to breathe. The ending is a complete dud. I don't want to say this was a failure, but by comparison, this was a failure. It was a wet fart. It was the air being left out of a balloon as it circles the room.
Can I see your pass?
I don't know what I did with it. I am a lost ball in the high weeds today.
We're going with Immaculate. So first things first, people would absolutely ape shit to see Sydney Sweeney in a more serious role. She's good. Is she great? No. I don't think all that praise is warranted, but she is good. This film barely has an original bone in its body. There's very little style or voice. The cinematography, the use of atmosphere isn't really there. I've been bitching all day about how some movies are moving unnecessarily slow. This one's too fast. The character isn't so much going on a journey, she's taking an Uber. There's no sense of kind of gradual or natural transition. It's just scenes are happening in this fast sequence, and then all the glue that keeps it together was deleted in post. Didn't feel like I knew any of the characters. And the third act especially is just a very slapdash chase through tunnels. It's okay, you know, I didn't hate it. It was an easy watch. I was never bored, but I didn't find it very memorable either. This one shares a lot of problems that MaXXXine had, which is that it can't focus. There's some very interesting ideas and setups, but there's nothing consistent about this film. From the tone, the music, the acting, I never got a sense of who these characters were or even how I was supposed to feel. There are isolated scenes that I think work very well. Some people might enjoy just how nuts this film is. I felt like it was more sloppy, but still entertaining. If it's free, check it out. You might have a better time than I did. Sting! Sting doesn't have too much ambition, but what Sting does is be a gross creature feature, and I think it does that relatively well. I think the practical effects are a success. Sting falls back on his characters a little bit more than I wish it did, just because the characters are pretty bland. When the horror actually starts to ramp up, it's fun. Like I said, the practical effects are gooey and enjoyable, and I think a lot of people will get a kick out of just how kind of gross some of the violence is, especially in the third act. But if you want just a fun creature feature that just gets increasingly wild, I think Sting is solid.
What's with the nail gun?
Protection.
From what?
It's New York, man. Take your pick.
Oh look, another text from a politician. I already voted, dick. Alright, in a violent nature, the movie is from the slasher's perspective. So we see him march through the woods and stalk these people and destroy them in incredibly visceral ways. Great concept, you would think. The character we're going to follow doesn't talk, is basically brainless, and moves about the speed of a tractor stuck in one gear. Watching the slash movie from the villain's perspective is kind of boring. I'm actually glad that we don't see a lot of the villain in those movies, because he's doing exactly what he's doing in this film, which is trudging along and trying not to trip over tree roots. I mean, there's a lot of that. Watching more of him like build traps or construct weapons or anything like that would have been a bit more engaging. Also, I didn't even mention the gore, but the gore is awesome. Showing the villain's perspective from a different kind of horror movie, I think that's a really kind of cool idea for a trilogy, like following the slasher, following the psychological murder, following the ghost. That sounds like a really good time. I'm very borderline on Oddity. I don't know whether to give it a 6 or a 7. I am not the kind of person who tries to poke tiny holes in a plot like it's a pincushion. Movies like Oddity, I feel like push it too much. A character will propose an idea, like, why don't you stay the night, person who just showed up at my doorstep? Oh, you left this weird, creepy, clearly deranged mannequin at our dining room table? Cool! I can't get past it. The characters doing this doesn't make sense. And someone will say, well, if they didn't do it, then the movie wouldn't happen. And they say that like that's a win, but to me, that just makes the movie worse. The music's creepy, this mannequin is creepy, like I like how this is framed. I think the way they used the tent was pretty effective, but we had to jump through so many Superman 64 rings to get to this point. I'm actually encouraging people to watch it and give it their perspective, because I know that mine is not going to be everyone's. I could not make that logical jump in the movie, and it did hurt my experience. And on top of that, I just didn't think the film was particularly scary. So there's that, but certainly worth watching. This is Mods. There's just two things I'm going to say about this movie other than the fact that I really enjoyed it. One, the movie establishes just enough for you to get a handle on the characters, their motivations, their flaws. And once you start getting comfortable, it slowly starts to pivot into something else, and then it pivots again. So I think the film does a really good job of keeping you on your toes and surprising you in a way that feels justified instead of random. Second thing is that Mods is a one-shot film. I actually like the fact that you can see a few technical flaws, because it almost like it adds validity to the fact it's one shot. Kind of like when you watch a live show, and sometimes it's fun to see like a little mistake here, because you realize like, oh yeah, like this is This is real. This is not pre-recorded. It feels like the whole film is just like this wild roller coaster happening right in front of you. It's incredibly intense and fun. As a one-shot film, the amount of movement, transportation, different locations that are used in this film is almost extraordinary. There's a lot of coordination that was required for this. At the very least, watch the first, 15 minutes. I mean, that's when I started to realize it was one shot, and then by that point, I was just hooked. Longlegs, which I'm giving a 7 out of 10. I think the attributes of this film far outweigh some of its story flaws. Yes, the climax felt rushed. However, this film is trippy and bizarre and clearly having a lot of fun diving into these different concepts. Whether it's this picture word association, Nicolas Cage screaming some kind of lyric in the car, which rises to such a level that actually kind of freaked me out. Some of the crime scenes are horrifying, even when they're just being described to the main character. I love the opening credits. The film just feels disturbed. It feels like the film is in a dark place and is pulling us down with it. It made me feel sick. It gave me the kind of Midsummer vibe where I felt like I shouldn't be watching this. It was showing me things I hadn't seen. It was making me feel things I hadn't felt. And for horror, I think that's a big accomplishment. Next up is The Substance, which I'm giving an 8 out of 10. The filmmaking is on an expert level. It's creative, it's beautifully shot and well put together. The editing is excellent, but it's not trying to be a dry or stale film in any regard. There's no pretentiousness at all with this film. This is something M. Night should pay attention to. It's very clear which character we should take as a serious person and which character should be kind of like a cartoony stereotype to push along the narrative. Very interesting and original concept that is not only fresh and very kind of gross and visceral, but has links to reality. It preys upon this terror of becoming old and irrelevant. I wouldn't say I got nauseous, but gaggy. There are moments here and there I'm like, ugh, it's so... The practical effects are just next level. It's the kind of film that's definitely not trying to attract a wider audience. However, because it's so well made, because it's so creative, and because all its grossness, to a certain extent, does have a purpose, it is attracting quite a large audience because people are so hungry for something new, that's something that sparks someone's imagination, and this thing is firing on all cylinders. And last up, my favorite horror film of 2024 so far is The First Omen. Big surprise. I've been talking about this one constantly. The First Omen takes just enough from The Omen to have a kind of a loose foundation. But outside of that, this is very much its own film. This is a psychedelic, strange, gorgeous film. Certain shots are ominous. The use of lighting is beautiful. It knows just how to kind of set you off balance. There's a scene that I feel like was inspired by the movie The Possession, and Nell Tiger Free really sold that kind of sequence of being possessed and turned into something animalistic. It's a constant evolving nightmare. I feel like if this was an original film without being related to The Omen at all, this could have been a 9 or a 10. I really do think those are the only not exemplary moments in this film. It's a little long, but honestly, that aspect did not bother me because I felt like I was really getting a full meal for all of those reasons, for its technical proficiencies, for the emotions it brought out of me, for its creativity. I have to give The First Omen not only an 8, but the spot of my favorite horror movie of the year. All I can do is hope that Nosferatu will be good enough to beat it.
You guys mind if I join?
Carlita, did you do this drawing?
This part is mine. El ragazzo.
I don't think that's very appropriate, sister.
That is my roundup for all the horror movies I saw this year so far. I got more horror videos coming soon. Subscribe, share, all the support means the world. And as always, thanks for watching.